And on the line with us, our old buddy Greg Palast, who has been just, boy, this has been his year. The investigative journalist, author, filmmaker, his most recent, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. You can find it over at Amazon. GregPalast.com is the website. You can tweet him at Greg_Palast, just like I'm Thom_Hartmann. Greg, welcome back.
Glad to be with you, Tom. Quite a day.
Yeah. So Mississippi and Stacy Abrams seem to be at the top of the news. Tell us what's going on. Let's start with Mississippi. What's going on there as Lynch and Cindy is trying to hang on to the seat to which she had been previously appointed?
Right. Well, today is the runoff for the U.S. Senate seat against incumbent, that is, she was just appointed, Cindy Hyde-Smith, versus former Clinton Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Espy. And Espy spoke to my team, which is down in Mississippi right now, and he told us something no one else has reported. It's just ugly, an old trick called push polling. They're calling elderly black voters, and they are telling them, according to Espy, and he's got legal affidavits signed by these voters, they're telling them that if you, who do you want to vote for? We're polling, we're doing a poll on the race. Who are you voting for Senate? And if they said Mike Espy, they said, oh, great. And by the way, that this registers your vote, so you do not have to vote on Tuesday. That?
Now, not only is that pretty bizarre, but in the piece that I read that that I believe you wrote, you pointed out that this is not the first time this exact same play has happened, and the last time it was outed, we discovered who was paying for it.
Yes, back in '96, it turns out the money traced back to the Koch brothers doing push polling in Kansas, backing Sam Brownback, the ultra-right, at that time running for Senate against Jill Docking. And they would ask you, who do you want to vote for Senate? If they said Docking, they said, would you reconsider your vote if you knew that Jill Docking is Jewish? By the way, she is. And so Docking lost. So that was a case. That's a typical case of push polling. By the way, there was one other case in George Bush, someone supporting George W. Bush, I can't say it's Bush, did push polling on McCain when they were running in the primaries back in 2000 when they were asking people if they would still vote for McCain, knowing that he had fathered a black illegitimate child.
Right, and this was based on this is a major scandal. And this was in the Carolinas that this was happening, and of course he has a daughter that they adopted from Bangladesh, or he's no longer with us. I mean, he had one. But go ahead.
The thing is, this is even worse, because it's not just smearing the candidate. It's saying you don't have to vote. Your vote's been recorded. That goes from bad taste, nasty work, to absolutely illegal under federal law. Mm-hmm. You're denying someone the right to vote, and that is a violation of federal law. It's a crime. You go to jail for that. That's what's happening in Mississippi. Ugly stuff in Mississippi. And then we turn, then we got Georgia. Mm-hmm. So today Stacy Abrams filed a federal lawsuit, I should say, and her organization, now a nonpartisan group called Fair Fight Georgia, has filed a federal lawsuit to basically demand the total redo of the Georgia voting system to take it back out of the Jim Crow era. After the Voting Rights Act was gutted by the Supreme Court in 2013, as the suit noted, Georgia became the worst backsliding state in the nation, according to a study by Harvard. On every single count of Jim Crow trickery, Georgia was in the front of the line. Mm-hmm. And from cutting back early voting, but they also, I was glad that they picked up, because I'd been talking to their attorneys. Again, I couldn't do it until Stacy Abrams set up a nonpartisan organization. Two things that I brought to their attention. One is the massive refusal to hand people provisional ballots, which is required by law. And thank you, Tom, for getting me in touch with ex-Congressman Ney, who actually wrote that provision saying voters wrongly purged from the voter rolls can get a provisional ballot and challenge it. Well, what Brian Kemp did, he turned down, he put out the word to not allow people whom he had purged wrongly to even get a ballot, a provisional ballot, to challenge that purge. Right. That's been put into the lawsuit. I did tell them to get a hold of Congressman Nate to talk about why that is in the law to stop this kind of racist trickery.
Yep. And in fact, Bob Nate told me, and this is in the article that I wrote, that after the law was passed, he was the congressman from Ohio. He was a Republican. And Michael, what was his name? The guy who was the Secretary of State.
Oh, Ken
Blackwell. Ken Blackwell, that's right.
Yeah, Blackwell.
And Ken Blackwell was still refusing to give people provisional ballots, and he was still purging people, et cetera, et cetera. And he said he confronted Blackwell about it, and Blackwell said, I'm just going to keep on doing this. Tough luck, Bob.
And then we end up also in the Stacy Abrams lawsuit. As you know, I did, and we discussed on our program, and this is how the word got out, that we had the list of all the people wrongly purged, 340,134 people, which we know for certain were wrongly purged. She's taking that on. That's at the top of her suit, taking on the Georgia law that basically authorized Kemp, in violation of the Constitution, in violation of federal law, to remove people because they failed to vote and failed to return a postcard. I call it purge by postcard. Right. They call it use it or lose it. But
we used to call it caging.
Yeah, and so what it is, and by the way, they explained how this hits voters of color in the face because of this whole postcard scam. Because if you're a poor kid or even a student, you don't have to be poor, and you're moving around, you're not even getting that postcard to return this piece of junk mail, and you lose your vote.
Right.
They also had this exact match business and proof of citizenship, which is used also in Georgia, and they said 1/4, even though it's only like 2% of the voting public in Georgia is Asian American, 1/4 of the people who were denied the right to vote under this, this exact match system where every single letter and space in your name has to match the voting records and your driver's license, that 1/4 of the people who lost their vote were Asian American. By the way, Asian Americans vote about 75% Democratic in Georgia, so they knew who they were going after. 3/4 of the people who got knocked out by this process are non-white. So tell me, was this to protect the voter rolls, or was this to run a sophisticated Jim Crow operation? That's what Stacy Abrams' lawsuit is about. It cites the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, the Voting Rights Act, and the Help America Vote Act. That is what Bob Ney had put together to protect voters. There were some honest Republicans around, when it comes to electoral process. There were a few Republicans who thought, well, maybe we ought to just win the votes instead of stealing the votes.
Yeah, what a novel idea. Before we wrap this up, Greg, if I could just go back to Mississippi for a moment. I have not heard anything about purge lists coming out of Mississippi. Has their Secretary of State been running a fairly, clean game there, or were they part of the Chris Kobach's whole interstate cross-check thing?
Completely. They were in the Kobach operation, and in fact, my lawyers have already notified them that they're going to end up in federal court unless they turn over all the information on the purge list that they got from Chris Kobach. So they did a whole Kobach on the voter rolls of Mississippi. You look at the population of Mississippi, there is no reason for that to be a red state. But if you
it's got the largest black population in the United States, doesn't it, on a per capita basis?
Yeah, and so if you put together black and the growing Hispanic and Asian American population,
right.
And so what's happened is if you look at the state of Mississippi plus the progressives in the cities, there's no reason why it should be a red state. If everyone who had the right to vote got the vote, that would change everything. And I'm going to tell you, Mississippi, Georgia, we've really gone back 50 years in voting rights in those states. And Stacy Abrams, bless her, has brought this lawsuit to say enough is enough, and we're going to change the entire electoral system in Georgia so it conforms to democracy.
Yeah, and I sure hope that she's successful. And you're just absolutely indefatigable efforts, Greg. I mean, you have been on this beat for so long, and you've done such a brilliant job of it. I'm so grateful to you, and I know that all of our listeners, maybe most of our listeners are. We have a few Republicans out there. Greg Palast. Go ahead, Greg.
Thank you so much for letting me through the electronic Berlin Wall.
My pleasure. GregPalast.com is the website.